The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that made Officer Clara Hayes feel both calm and uneasy at the same time. She had been patrolling these roads for years, but tonight felt different, like something was waiting just out of sight, watching her every move. The only sounds breaking the stillness were the soft hum of her police cruiser's engine and the occasional chirp of crickets hiding in the tall grass along the roadside. Clara adjusted her seat slightly, glancing at the dashboard clock. It was nearly midnight, and she doubted anything exciting would happen tonight. Most people in this small town were already tucked into bed, leaving the darkened streets deserted. But as a cop, she knew better than to let her guard down completely. Danger didn't always announce itself with flashing lights or loud noises. Sometimes it crept up silently, catching you off guard when you least expected it. As she drove around a sharp bend on an isolated stretch of road, her headlight suddenly illuminated something, or someone, on the side of the road. Her heart skipped a beat. At first glance, it looked like a bundle of clothes discarded carelessly by the shoulder. But then it moved. Just slightly. Enough to make her slam on the brakes and pull over. Stepping out of the car cautiously, Clara reached for her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. What she saw made her freeze mid-step. Sitting cross-legged on the cold asphalt was a little boy, no older than 6 or 7. His clothes were torn and dirty, clearly not suited for the chilly night. His hair was messy, sticking out in all directions, and his face was pale, almost ghostly under the dim glow of her headlights. He didn't seem scared or startled by her presence. Instead, he just sat there, staring straight ahead as if lost in thought. Clara crouched down slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hey there, buddy," she said gently. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The boy didn't answer right away. For a moment, Clara wondered if he even heard her. Then, without warning, he turned his head toward her, locking eyes with her in a way that sent chills down her spine. There was something unsettling about his gaze. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't innocent either. It was as if he was looking through her, seeing things she couldn't. But it wasn't his eyes that made Clara's blood run cold. It was his forehead. As her flashlight beam swept across his face, she noticed something strange etched onto his skin. Symbols. Strange, intricate markings that seemed to shimmer faintly, almost glowing under the moonlight. They weren't tattoos. They looked more like they were alive, shifting ever so slightly like smoke trapped beneath glass. Clara blinked hard, wondering if her tired eyes were playing tricks on her. But when she looked again, the symbols were still there, pulsing faintly as though they had a heartbeat of their own. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this boy? Where did he come from? And what were those markings on his forehead? Every instinct told her to call for backup, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way the boy stared at her, as if he'd been expecting her all along. Or maybe it was the eerie feeling that whatever she was dealing with wasn't going to be explained by a simple phone call to dispatch. Whatever it was, Clara knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary night, and this was no ordinary child. Clara stayed crouched near the boy, her flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. She tried to steady her breathing, but her mind was racing with unanswered questions. The symbols on his forehead were unlike anything she'd ever seen. Too complex, too deliberate to be random marks or scars. They seemed to hum faintly, though she couldn't tell if it was real or just her imagination playing tricks on her. Whatever they were, they gave off an unsettling energy that made her skin crawl. "Hey, buddy," Clara said again. Softer this time, trying to sound calm despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Can you tell me your name? Where are your parents?" The boy didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as though he were deciding whether or not to trust her. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost in the rustling leaves around them, he whispered, "They told me you'd come." Clara blinked, caught off guard by his words. "Who told you I'd come?" she asked quickly, leaning closer. But before the boy could respond, he reached out and touched her arm. His fingers were icy cold against her skin, sending a jolt through her body. For a split second, everything went black. The world around her disappeared, replaced by flashes of chaotic images flooding her mind. She saw shadowy figures moving in the dark, their shapes distorted and menacing. Flames licked at the edges of her vision, consuming everything in sight. Voices echoed in her ears, chanting in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood deep down. It was a warning about something big, something dangerous. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision vanished, leaving Clara gasping for air. She pulled her arm back instinctively, staring at the boy with wide eyes. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. What was that? She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy didn't seem fazed by her reaction. Instead, he smiled faintly, as if he'd expected her to see those visions all along. "You'll understand soon," he said simply, his tone calm and matter-of-fact. It was eerie how composed he seemed, especially for someone so young. Most kids would have been terrified being alone in the middle of nowhere at night, but this boy carried himself like he knew exactly what was going on, even if Clara didn't. Clara shook her head, trying to clear the lingering haze from her mind. She needed answers, but the boy wasn't giving much away. "Okay, look," she said firmly, forcing herself to focus. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Do you know where you live? Who brought you here?" The boy's smile faded, replaced by a distant look in his eyes. "I don't belong here," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" Clara pressed, frustration creeping into her voice. This conversation felt like wading through quicksand. Every question led to another mystery, pulling her deeper into confusion. But the boy didn't elaborate. Instead, he stood up slowly, brushing dirt off his already tattered pants. His movements were deliberate, almost unnervingly graceful for someone his age. Clara hesitated, unsure of what to do next. She couldn't just leave him here, but taking him back to the station felt wrong too. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on, that made her feel like following protocol wouldn't solve anything. Still, she had no choice. "Come on," she said finally, gesturing toward her car. "Let's get you warmed up, okay? We can figure things out from there." To her surprise, the boy nodded without argument and climbed into the passenger seat. As Clara got behind the wheel, she glanced over at him. He sat perfectly still, staring out the window as if he were watching something invisible to everyone else. The glowing symbols on his forehead had dimmed slightly, but they were still there, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. For the first time in her career, Clara found herself questioning reality. Was this really happening? Or was she stuck in some kind of bizarre dream she couldn't wake up from? One thing was certain: this boy wasn't ordinary, and whatever secrets he carried, they weren't going to stay hidden for long. Back at the station, Clara tried to make sense of the strange encounter while keeping her growing unease in check. The boy sat quietly on a chair in the corner of her office, his legs dangling above the floor. He didn't fidget or complain. Instead, he seemed content to simply observe everything around him with an unsettling calmness. Officers passing by glanced curiously at the child, exchanging whispers about how unusual he looked, and not just because of his tattered clothes or pale complexion. There was something off about him, something they couldn't quite put into words. Clara decided to take matters into her own hands. She snapped several photos of the glowing symbols on the boy's forehead with her phone, careful not to startle him. When she asked again about his name or where he came from, he only repeated cryptic phrases like, "It's time," and "You have to stop them." Each answer left her more confused than before. Who were they? And what exactly was she supposed to stop? With no leads and no way to contact anyone who might know the boy, Clara turned to the internet. She sent the pictures of the symbols to experts in ancient languages, anthropology, and even paranormal research, anyone who might recognize the markings. Most responses came back blank. One professor admitted the symbols resembled patterns, found in obscure mythologies but insisted they weren't anything human-made. Another suggested the images could be digitally altered hoaxes. Frustrated, Clara began to wonder if she'd imagined the whole thing, or worse, if the boy himself wasn't entirely real. As hours passed, strange things started happening around him. Electronics acted up whenever he was nearby. The clock on Clara's desk stopped working completely, its hands frozen at 3:17. Her computer screen flickered erratically when she typed up notes about their interaction, forcing her to restart it multiple times. Other officers grew increasingly uneasy, whispering among themselves about curses or supernatural forces. Some joked nervously about calling in a priest, though none of them actually volunteered to stick around long enough to see what would happen next. One particularly chilling moment occurred late that night when Clara reviewed footage from her dashcam. She rewound the video to the part where she first spotted the boy sitting by the road. At first glance, everything appeared normal. He was clearly visible under the headlights, his small frame illuminated against the dark backdrop. But as Clara zoomed in on the playback, her blood ran cold. Behind the boy, barely noticeable at first, stood shadowy figures. They weren't solid shapes, but rather wisps of darkness, shifting and writhing like smoke caught in the wind. Their presence seemed unnatural, almost predatory, as if they were watching silently from just beyond the edge of reality. Clara paused the video, leaning closer to the screen. Her heart pounded as she studied the figures. Were they reflections, tricks of the light, or something far more sinister? She replayed the clip over and over, hoping to find some logical explanation, but nothing changed. The figures remained there, unmoving yet menacing, their forms indistinct yet undeniably alive. When she finally tore her eyes away from the screen, she noticed the boy standing behind her. She hadn't heard him approach, which should have been impossible given the squeaky floorboards in her office. His expression was unreadable, but his glowing symbols pulsed brighter now, casting faint shadows across the walls. "You saw them, didn't you?" he said softly, his voice devoid of emotion. Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Who are they?" she managed to ask, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "They're waiting," the boy replied, his gaze fixed on hers. "And they're getting closer." For the rest of the night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, watching her every move. Every sound, the creak of a door, the hum of fluorescent lights, felt heavier somehow, charged with an ominous energy she couldn't explain. Though she tried to focus on finding answers, one thought kept circling through her mind. Whatever this boy was tied to, it wasn't going to stay hidden for long, and sooner or later she'd have to face it head on. The next morning, Clara woke up exhausted but restless. She hadn't slept much after bringing the boy back to the station. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of the shadowy figures from the dashcam footage haunted her thoughts. The glowing symbols on the boy's forehead, the cryptic warnings he kept repeating, they all pointed to something far beyond her understanding. And now, with no help coming from experts or colleagues, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss she couldn't fully comprehend. Determined not to give up, Clara decided to dig deeper. She remembered hearing about Dr. Evelyn Carter, a reclusive scholar who specialized in ancient languages and obscure mythologies. Though most people dismissed her work as fringe science, Clara was desperate enough to try anything. After some digging online, she managed to track down Evelyn's contact information and sent her an email with the photos of the symbols. To her surprise, Evelyn responded within minutes, requesting a face-to-face meeting. Clara arranged for another officer to keep an eye on the boy while she drove to Evelyn's secluded home on the outskirts of town. The house itself looked like it belonged in a horror movie. Creaky wooden boards, overgrown vines climbing the walls, and windows so dusty they seemed almost opaque. But Clara didn't have time to dwell on the eerie atmosphere. As soon as Evelyn opened the door, Clara could tell this woman wasn't someone who wasted words. Evelyn ushered her inside without hesitation, leading her to a cluttered study filled with stacks of books, scrolls, and strange artifacts. Clara laid out the photos on the desk, explaining everything that had happened. The boy by the road, the glowing symbols, the visions, the shadowy figures on the dash cam footage. Evelyn listened intently, her sharp eyes scanning each image with growing alarm. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and strained. "These aren't ordinary markings," she said, pointing to one of the photos. "They're binding runes, symbols used to contain immense power, or beings." Her finger traced the intricate patterns as if connecting invisible dots. Whoever did this, they've bound something, or someone, to that child. He's a vessel. "A vessel," Clara echoed, her stomach sinking. "For what?" Evelyn hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It depends. These runes are designed to act as both a prison and a beacon. They trap whatever is inside him, but they also signal its presence to other entities. If those runes fade, or are removed, it could unleash something catastrophic." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of entities are we talking about here?" Evelyn sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. "Things that shouldn't exist in our world. Beings from realms outside our reality. They're drawn to power, especially when it's contained. That boy isn't human, not entirely. Someone has marked him for a purpose, and based on what you've described, I'd say it's tied to something dark. Very dark." The weight of Evelyn's words hit Clara like a punch to the gut. She thought back to the boy's calm demeanor, his cryptic phrases, the way the symbols pulsed faintly, almost alive. Was he truly just a child caught in something beyond his control? Or was there more to him than met the eye? "What happens if the runes disappear completely?" Clara asked, dreading the answer. Evelyn shook her head gravely. "If the containment fails, whatever is trapped inside him will break free. And trust me, you don't want to be anywhere near that when it happens." On the drive back to the station, Clara replayed Evelyn's warning in her mind. She knew she had two choices: leave the boy alone and risk whoever marked him returning to finish their plan, or keep him close and face whatever dangers came with it. Neither option felt safe, but abandoning him wasn't an option. Not after everything she'd seen, and not after realizing how deeply connected she already was to this mystery. By the time she returned, the boy was waiting patiently in her office, as if he'd known she'd come back. His glowing symbols still shimmered faintly, though they seemed dimmer now, as if fading slowly. Clara knelt beside him, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "You're not alone in this," she promised. "I'll figure it out. I'll protect you." The boy looked up at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Clara thought she saw gratitude flicker in his eyes. But then he whispered softly, "It's too late for protection. You'll have to let me go." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Clara didn't fully understand what he meant yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. As days passed, Clara found herself growing more entangled in the mystery surrounding the boy. Each moment spent with him brought new challenges and new fears. The strange phenomena that followed him were becoming harder to ignore. Electronics malfunctioned constantly whenever he was nearby. Radios crackled with static even when turned off. Once, during a routine check-in at the station, the entire room filled with an icy mist so thick it made it hard to see across the desk. It lingered for only a few seconds before vanishing as quickly as it appeared, leaving everyone shaken. Other officers began avoiding her office altogether, whispering about curses and bad omens. Some joked nervously about calling in a priest or burning sage to cleanse the space, but no one dared step foot near the boy again. Clara couldn't blame them. Even she felt uneasy, though she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She had promised to protect him, and she intended to keep that promise, even if doing so meant confronting forces she didn't fully understand. One evening, after sending the rest of the team home early, Clara decided to review the dashcam footage once more. She needed answers, and something about those shadowy figures gnawed at her mind. Sitting alone in her dimly lit office, she replayed the video frame by frame, focusing on the area behind the boy. At first glance, the figures seemed like wisps of smoke, indistinct and formless. But the longer she stared, the more details emerged. Their shapes twisted unnaturally, elongated limbs reaching out as if trying to grab hold of something, or someone. Clara zoomed in closer, her breath catching in her throat. This time, she noticed something she hadn't seen before: faint outlines of faces within the shadows. They weren't human faces, not entirely. Their features were distorted, stretched into grotesque masks of anger and hunger. And their eyes. Their glowing, hollow eyes seemed to stare directly at her, even through the screen. Her hands trembled as she paused the video. Was this real? Or was her mind playing tricks on her? She glanced over at the boy who sat quietly in the corner, watching her with an unreadable expression. His glowing symbols pulsed faintly, almost in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. For a brief second, she wondered if he could sense what she was seeing, if he knew how deeply the images terrified her. "You're afraid," the boy said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but it sent another shiver down her spine. "I'm not afraid," Clara lied, forcing a weak smile. I need to understand what's going on." The boy tilted his head slightly, studying her as if weighing her words. Then he stood up and walked over to where she sat. Without hesitation, he placed his small hand on hers. Instantly, the room grew colder, and Clara felt the same rush of fragmented vision she'd experienced earlier. Flames engulfed her surroundings, voices chanted in unison, and shadowy figures loomed closer, their forms shifting menacingly. But this time, the vision included something new: a place. A forest clearing bathed in perpetual twilight, surrounded by ancient stone structures covered in moss. In the center stood a massive archway carved with intricate designs eerily similar to the symbols on his forehead. When the vision faded, Clara gasped for air, her palms clammy and her chest tight. "What was that?" she whispered hoarsely. "The veil," the boy replied simply. "It's where I have to go." Clara shook her head, struggling to process what she'd just seen. "Why? What is it?" "It's a gateway," he explained, his tone patient yet distant. "Between worlds. If I don't reach it soon, they'll break free, and you won't be able to stop them." His words hung heavy in the air, filling the room with an oppressive silence. Clara wanted to argue, to demand more answers, but deep down, she knew there was truth in what he said. Whatever these entities were, they weren't confined to some distant realm. They were here, lurking just beyond the edges of reality, waiting for their chance to break through. That night, Clara lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Who had marked the boy? Why had they chosen him? And why did it feel like everything was leading back to her? One thing was certain: she couldn't turn away now. Whether she liked it or not, she was part of this story, and the choices she made next would determine far more than just her own fate. The weight of the boy's words pressed down on Clara, heavier with each passing hour. The veil was no ordinary destination. It wasn't marked on any map or listed in any guidebook. Yet she knew it existed, not just because of the vision he'd shown her, but because of the growing sense that time was running out. The glowing symbols on his forehead were fading faster now, their faint glow dimming like a dying ember. Whatever power they contained was slipping away, and Clara could feel the tension in the air thickening, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Desperate for clarity, Clara returned to Evelyn Carter's home. The scholar greeted her with a mix of curiosity and concern, clearly sensing the urgency in Clara's demeanor. "Tell me everything," Evelyn said, ushering her inside. Clara recounted the latest developments: the visions, the forest clearing, the archway known as the Veil. Evelyn listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing as Clara described the fading runes. "This isn't good," Evelyn murmured, pacing back and forth across the cluttered study. "If the containment fails completely—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Think of those symbols as chains holding something monstrous at bay. When they break, whatever is bound within him will be unleashed. And trust me, you don't want to meet what's waiting on the other side. Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry. Then what do we do? How do we stop it? Evelyn hesitated, her expression grim. You can't stop it, not directly, but there might be a way to redirect it. The veil, it's not just a gateway. It's a threshold between worlds, a place where energies converge. If the boy reaches it before the runes fade completely, he might be able to sever the connection himself. He'll have to step through. Step through? Clara echoed, her voice trembling. What happens to him if he does? Evelyn avoided meeting her gaze. That's the problem, I don't know. Crossing into another realm, it could destroy him, or it could free him. Either way, staying here isn't an option. If the containment breaks while he's still in this world, her voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken consequences hanging in the air. Clara felt a knot tighten in her chest. Sending a child, no matter how mysterious or otherworldly, into danger felt wrong. But leaving him behind would put everyone else at risk. She thought about the shadowy figures from the dashcam footage, their hollow eyes staring straight at her. They weren't just watching, they were waiting, and every second she delayed brought them closer. Back at the station, Clara found the boy sitting quietly in her office as if he'd been expecting her. His calm demeanor unnerved her, especially given the gravity of what lay ahead. We need to go, she said softly, kneeling beside him. To the veil. The boy nodded, unsurprised. I know, he replied. But you have to promise me something. What is it? Clara asked, her heart pounding. You have to let me go when the time comes. Don't try to stop me. Clara opened her mouth to protest, but the look in his eyes silenced her. There was wisdom in his gaze, far beyond his years, as if he understood things she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Reluctantly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I promise. Using clues from Evelyn's research and fragments from the boy's visions, they pieced together a rough location for the veil, an isolated forest deep in the mountains miles from civilization. Clara packed supplies hastily, unsure of what awaited them but knowing they couldn't afford to delay. As they drove toward the wilderness, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air charged with an unnatural energy. Shadows seemed longer, sounds sharper, and the horizon tinged with an eerie twilight that never brightened or faded. When they finally reached the edge of the forest, Clara turned to the boy, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Are you ready? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and touched her hand one last time. A surge of warmth flooded her body, accompanied by a fleeting image. The boy standing alone in the clearing, bathed in light, smiling as the archway sealed shut behind him. Then the vision vanished, leaving Clara blinking back tears. I'm ready, he said finally, his voice soft but resolute. Together, they stepped into the forest, leaving the safety of the known world behind. Every step forward felt like walking into the unknown, but Clara knew there was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, or not at all. The forest was unlike anything Clara had ever seen. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Shafts of dim light filtered through the dense canopy above, casting long, distorted shadows on the moss-covered ground. Every sound, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant rustle of branches, felt amplified, echoing eerily around them. It was as though the forest existed in a realm caught between reality and something far darker. Clara stayed close to the boy, her flashlight beam cutting weakly through the twilight that seemed permanent here. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, the boy walked steadily, his small frame moving with purpose. He didn't hesitate or falter, as if he knew exactly where they were going. The glowing symbols on his forehead had grown fainter now, almost translucent, pulsing weakly like a flickering candle about to go out. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away faster than either of them realized. As they ventured deeper into the woods, strange things began to happen. The temperature dropped sharply, their breath visible in the icy air despite the lack of wind. Shadows shifted unnaturally, twisting and writhing along the edges of Clara's vision. Once she thought she saw movement behind a tree, a pair of hollow eyes staring back at her, but when she turned to look closer, there was nothing there. Her grip tightened on the flashlight, her knuckles white from tension. "Are we close?" Clara whispered, breaking the silence. The boy nodded without slowing down. "Almost," he replied, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "They're getting closer, too." "Who's getting closer?" Clara asked, though part of her didn't want to hear the answer. "The ones who marked me," he said simply. "They'll try to stop us." Clara's heart raced. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but the boy quickened his pace, leaving no room for further questions. They pressed on, navigating through increasingly dense underbrush until finally they emerged into a clearing. And there it was, the Vale. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone archway, its surface etched with intricate carvings that mirrored the fading symbols on the boy's forehead. The air around it shimmered faintly, as though heat waves radiated from the structure itself. Beyond the archway lay only darkness, an endless void that seemed to stretch infinitely, swallowing all light. Clara felt a chill run down her spine just looking at it. "This is it," the boy said, stopping a few feet away from the arch. His voice was soft but steady, carrying a weight that made Clara's chest tighten. "I have to go now." Clara stepped forward instinctively, reaching out toward him. "Wait, are you sure? Is there another way?" The boy shook his head, his expression solemn. "There isn't. If I don't do this, they'll break free, you know that." Clara clenched her fists, fighting back tears. She had promised to let him go, but the reality of losing him now felt unbearable. "What happens to you after this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," he admitted, his gaze meeting hers. "But it doesn't matter. This is what I'm meant to do." Before Clara could respond, the forest around them grew deathly quiet. Even the rustling leaves stilled, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then came the sound, a low, guttural growl that reverberated. Through the clearing, from the shadows emerged figures, their forms shifting and indistinct like smoke given shape. Their glowing eyes locked onto the boy, filled with malice and hunger. "They're here," the boy said, stepping toward the archway. "You need to stay back." "No!" Clara shouted, panic rising in her chest. "You can't face them alone." But the boy didn't waver. As the shadowy figures advanced, the symbols on his forehead flared brightly, illuminating the entire clearing. The light pushed back against the encroaching darkness, forcing the entities to retreat momentarily. Without hesitation, the boy stepped through the archway, and the shimmering veil sealed shut behind him with a deafening crack, like glass shattering. For a moment, Clara stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the boy had been. Then slowly, the forest began to return to normal. The oppressive energy lifted, the unnatural cold faded, and the shadows retreated. The archway remained, silent and lifeless, as if it had never been activated. Clara sank to her knees, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and grief. She didn't know what had happened to the boy or if she'd ever see him again, but one thing was certain. Whatever threat had loomed over their world was gone. For now. The forest was eerily quiet now, the oppressive weight that had hung in the air completely gone. Clara sat on the damp ground, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the ancient stone archway. It stood motionless and lifeless, its intricate carvings no longer glowing, as if it had been drained of whatever power once coursed through it. The boy was gone, vanished into the void beyond the veil, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. Clara replayed the events, in her mind over and over again, the glowing symbols, the shadowy figures, the boy's calm acceptance of his fate. He had known exactly what he was doing, even if she hadn't fully understood it. But now, without him there to guide her, everything felt incomplete, unresolved. Had he survived? Was he safe? Or had stepping through the veil cost him everything? She forced herself to stand, brushing dirt and leaves off her uniform. Her legs felt heavy, not just from exhaustion, but from the emotional toll of what she'd witnessed. As much as she wanted to believe the danger was truly over, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, that something larger, something far more complex, was still at play. The boy had mentioned them, the ones who marked him. Who were they? And would they come looking for answers or revenge? Clara took one last look at the archway before turning away. She didn't know how long she walked through the forest, retracing their steps back to her car, but by the time she reached the edge of the woods, dawn was breaking. The sun peeked hesitantly over the horizon, casting golden light across the landscape. It should have felt comforting after the darkness of the night, but Clara couldn't shake the lingering chill in her bones. When she returned to the station, things felt different. Officers greeted her with cautious smiles, unsure of what to say or ask. Word had spread about the boy and the strange occurrences surrounding him, though Clara hadn't shared many details. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? Instead, she buried herself in paperwork, using the monotony of routine to distract herself from the memories that refused to fade. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. The malfunctioning electronics stopped acting up, the icy mists disappeared, and the station settled back into its usual rhythm. But Clara couldn't forget. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy's face, heard his voice whispering cryptic warnings. She began keeping tabs on unusual reports, strange sightings, unexplained phenomena, but nothing matched what she'd experienced. One evening, while organizing files in her office, Clara noticed something tucked inside a folder she hadn't touched in months. It was a single sheet of paper, blank except for a few words written in neat handwriting. "Thank you." There was no signature, no explanation, but Clara knew immediately who it was from. Her hands trembled as she held the note, tears welling up in her eyes. Somehow, against all odds, the boy had found a way to reach her one last time. That night, Clara drove back to the forest, parking near the clearing where the archway stood. To her surprise, it was gone, vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed. All that remained was an empty space surrounded by moss-covered stones. For a moment she stood there, letting the cool breeze wash over her. Then, smiling faintly, despite the ache in her heart, she whispered, "You're welcome." As she walked away, Clara realized she might never fully understand what had happened that night, or why she had been chosen to help. But deep down she knew one thing for certain. The boy had trusted her, and together they had done something extraordinary. Whatever forces lurked beyond the veil, whatever dangers awaited in the shadows, she had faced them head-on, and come out stronger for it. Though haunted by unanswered questions, Clara also felt a quiet sense of peace. She had done the right thing, even if it meant losing someone she barely knew yet somehow cared for deeply. And as she drove home, the first rays of sunlight streaming through her windshield, she vowed to keep moving forward, ready for whatever mysteries life threw her way next.